podcast. We'll get right into our conversation after a word from our sponsors. Life with migraine attacks can mean missing out on big moments with friends and family. Thankfully, there's Nurtec ODT Rimegepant 75 milligrams, the only medication that's proven to treat a migraine attack and prevent episodic migraines in adults. Get back to enjoying life with Nurtec ODT, the all-in-one medication. Don't take if allergic to Nurtec ODT or any of its ingredients. The most common side effects were nausea, indigestion, and stomach pain. Talk to a doctor about Nurtec ODT. For important safety, prescribing, and patient information, visit NURTEC.com. In our first introduction to Wakanda, we flocked to the theaters with jubilation and pride to revel in the on-screen magnificence, the characters, costumes, and world building. But this time, the experience of going to the movies with family and friends to see the new Black Panther film felt a little different. Many of us were adorned in white, bodies calm, and hearts steady as we prepared for what we knew would be both a cinematic gem and a grieving experience. Grief for the loss of our beloved Chadwick Boseman, our Black Panther, grief for the world that has drastically changed since the original film premiered in 2018, and the private grief we all hold in our hearts for our own meaningful reasons. It all felt like seeing your favorite cousins at a funeral. You're happy to see them because it's been a minute, but you wish it were under different circumstances. To discuss Wakanda Forever in depth, this week I'm joined by our beloved podcast producers, Cindy, Elise, and Frida. We explore the complexities of grief displayed across characters in the film, comment on storylines we were surprised and delighted by, and make predictions for the future of the Black Panther franchise. Please note that this episode does include spoilers for the film, so if you haven't had the opportunity to watch, please put the episode on pause and return once you've had time to enjoy it. If something resonates with you while enjoying our conversation, please share it with us on social media using the hashtag TBGInSession. Or join us over in the Sister Circle to talk more in depth about the episode. You can join us at community.therapyforblackgirls.com. Here's our conversation. So we are chatting today for another wonderful producers chat about one of our new favorite movies, Black Panther 2, Wakanda Forever. So again, if we could just start by doing introductions of who you are and your role on the team.
Hi, I'm Cindy. I'm one of the producers.
Hi, I'm Elise. I'm one of the producers on the Therapy for Black Girls podcast.
Hey, I'm Frida. I'm also one of the producers here at Therapy for Black Girls.
Perfect. All right, so I thought that we could start, as Elise suggested, by going around and saying 3 adjectives that would describe your experience of watching Wakanda Forever.
I don't have 3 adjectives, but I have 3 words. Colonizers, watch out.
You have a message.
I'm just picking up with the message of the film.
Okay. What about you, Elise?
It was soul stirring. I feel like that's a good way to describe it. Dynamic. And it was funny. I thought it was funny.
I think my 3 words would be moving, beautiful, and thought-provoking. Those would be mine. Cindy, did you have 3 words that would describe your experience seeing Wakanda Forever?
3 words. I think heavy, isolating, and beautiful.
Isolating is an interesting choice. Say more about isolating.
Yeah, I think it's also because, like, I had recently experienced a passing, and so, like, it was lovely to kind of, like, see grief manifested on screen, but I also went by myself, and I also was, like, feeling very, like, withdrawn personally, because I was just, like, in that reflective space. I think I was processing a lot of emotions in tandem with the movie. And so in certain ways, like, there were moments that I felt very isolated just because, like, I had been carrying like a lot of grief and like all the different stages and phases. Like the first one, I remember being so excited and ready to celebrate. But like going to see this one, I was a little bit fearful. I think it was because I was worried about how overwhelming the emotions were going to be for me, both the fictional ones, but also the ones that are real for me. And so I ended up choosing to see it by myself just because I like wasn't sure if I was going to like cry through the whole thing and just be disruptive. So yeah.
So let's talk about like your experience of going to the movie. So before, when we found out that it was coming out, of course, there was this whole family meeting around like wearing white to the theater and like bringing all of your people. And what was your experience of seeing the film for the first time? Because I believe both of you have seen it multiple times. I've only seen it once. But what was your experience at the first time? Did you wear white? Did you go with your family? What was it like?
I did not get the memo of wearing white and was properly annoyed with myself and my squad. We literally were looking like, oh, you all, I think we missed something online. We didn't get, oh, this is embarrassing. Somebody have any white socks to show, please.
What about you, Elise?
The first time I actually went by myself, I didn't wear white, but it was great seeing it alone. The second time I went with a big group of people, also didn't wear white or anything like that. But I liked chatting with everyone. I think I went with like 12 people about their expectations for the movie and what they liked about the first one, if they really remembered it, because Black Panther 1 was so long ago. And then after kind of deciphering with people, like, did it live up to your expectations? Do you think they did Chadwick justice? All those different things. So going with a lot of people was exciting because I kind of got a range of opinions about the movie other than my own.
Mm-hmm. I hear that. So even though I have not seen it again, I do plan on seeing it again. So I saw it for the first time with my husband and 2 kids. And so I felt like I was a little distracted because it's a long movie. So we had to have a potty break in the middle. So I feel like I missed some pretty crucial conversation. And I felt like I was answering a lot of questions. So I feel like I need to go back for myself when I can be undistracted. But we did not wear white. So I do feel like there was more, at least for me, it felt like I was in character for the first one, right? So I think I had a head wrap on and like all black. I don't think we had a specific color theme for the first one. I think it was just like getting in some kind of like costume or, you know, what we would imagine people would wear in Wakanda. And I didn't feel that same energy for this one. And I think it was a part of grief, right? Like a loss of Chadwick, and I'm sure we will talk about. But to me, I was very excited about seeing this film, but it didn't feel as like joyful maybe, or like, you know, like I didn't have that same level of a high wanting to go see this one as I did the first one. So what do you feel like has stayed with you since you saw the film?
I think the thing that has stayed with me is like the sunrise sort of feeling, where there's like always hope and joy. Like there's like always something else on the other side. Like that seems to have been the theme that like stuck with me the most after seeing it, is that like the sun will still rise and like you have the opportunity to like have a what's next, which is really cool.
What stuck with me was the way that Queen Ramonda, played by Angela Bassett, the way that she delivered a very painful punishment to Okoye, but also was merciful in that punishment. Initially, when I saw the scene, I thought Queen Ramonda was being too harsh. Like in the initial moment when Okoye is crying and she's like, and we know this as the audience, I was rooting for Okoye. She's clearly is willing to lay her life down for this kingdom and for the royal family and for everything that the country stands for. And I was like, oh, Queen Ramonda, like you're being a little rough, you know, like taking really her livelihood away from her in front of everybody. It just felt so, for a moment, it just felt like so much. But then when she defended her actions, and I really thought about it, as a queen, she could kill Okoye for this. this is punishable by death by other kingdoms, right? You've lost the princess. And I realize even when people harm Black women and we are rightfully entitled to be angry, I'll still think, oh, maybe you should be a little nicer. And even having to unlearn that as a Black woman, no, let her be mad. Let her be furious. She has lost everything. I'm sympathizing with Okoye's character. Okoye didn't lose her daughter. Okoye didn't lose her son. Granted, Okoye did everything to protect those two individuals for what I know of her, but that's what stuck with me. Let Black women be mad. She didn't want to be mad with Okoye. She didn't want to have to strict her from being the general of the army. But it had to be done. And I think personally for me, going into my 30s in this next year in 2023, identifying when it's really more than acceptable to be furious and how you can still be merciful and respectful even when you're laying the law down on somebody. And I think that was a lesson that I really needed to learn.
I did not look at it that way. I appreciate you sharing that. I hadn't seen it in that way, but I clearly see what you're saying now. What about you, Elise? What has stayed with you?
You guys all talked a little bit about this, but of course, grief was a really big theme in the film. And I think between King Namor, Queen Ramonda, Nakia, and Shuri, they all were experiencing grief. And what stuck with me about that was how grief can be like a vehicle to a lot of other emotions and a lot of other actions that I guess there's a range of responses to grief. And I think you saw it through each of those characters. And so with Queen Ramonda, it was anger. That was a big part of her grief. And with Shuri, she was grappling between anger and forgiveness. And you saw that in the scene with Killmonger's character. You saw that in that scene. And then with Nakia, it was isolation. Like she went to Haiti. She didn't come back for the funeral. She really removed herself from Wakanda, which probably was a big symbol of her grief. And then I don't have the clearest picture of this, but for King Namor, the Water King, what it looked like, he was also really angry about his homeland being taken away, what's being done to his people, then having to hide and defend himself against like the Western world or just world powers in general. And so it seemed like he was just very angry at the situation his country was in or his kingdom was in. And I think to point to what Frida said, sometimes we police the way people of color respond to grief. And I think all of those characters paint like a very beautiful picture and a realistic picture of how people respond to being exploited, being violated, death, things like that, which I think all encompass grief.
I completely agree with you. And, I know in kind of thinking about us recording this episode, we were talking about like, okay, at what point did you start crying in the movie? I started crying from the beginning. Like I cried throughout. As soon as the credits started rolling, like the silent montage of Chadwick, I started crying from the beginning and cried on and off throughout. Some of them were, I feel like, tears of sadness, but also I feel like just very moved. Like it just felt very stirring to me, just because again, like this whole world built with like all Black people and other people of color, like to me is just so incredible and feels like aspirational in some ways, such a departure from actual reality. And I also felt like I found myself, and I know that some of the tears I was crying really had nothing to do with the film, right? Like, I feel like it just was a way for me to release, I think, some of what I was holding on to, like my own grief, not necessarily related to like losses of people, but like just the losses of the past couple of years and just, the loss of Chadwick and thinking about, we've seen the cast as they've done press for it and talking about how they all were grieving collectively. So I'm also imagining like what that was like for them to be on set with one another without him, and just thinking about what this experience had been like for his family. So I feel like the film just kind of pulled on a lot of that, and I think a lot of people had similar reactions to kind of the grief related to the loss of him, but also whatever was going on in your own personal life. I think the film gave a space for that to kind of come to the surface.
I held my tears until the very end, but when
really,
yeah, because I didn't want to cry because I lost someone this year, a male figure in my life. And similar to what Cindy was saying, just knowing that you have to continue on without this person. and they would want you to do that. I feel like that's a narrative that has been true and consistently shared about this film. We all want Black Panther to continue, and knowing that in order for us to do that, we have to continue without Chadwick. And in order for me to continue on without my life, I have to do it without my loved one. So I didn't want to cry because I just felt like as soon as I started, I don't know when I would stop. But when Shuri got to the beach, there's something about the ocean, maybe because there's just so much water around you. Crying next to the ocean, you feel like your tears are so small. No one can see these. Everyone's focusing on the ocean. That's a much bigger body of water than what's coming out of my eyes. When she sat down, I felt like, eventually we all will have to sit down. Or not eventually we will have to, but it is in our best interest to eventually sit down and really succumb to the sadness that you might feel. And I just let it all out. And then Rihanna's song, Lift Me Up, is just so beautiful. It's so good. There's something about it that really touched a chord in my heart.
And I do think that speaks to your earlier point, Elise, around like the different ways that people manage grief. And we saw that even with Shuri and Queen Ramonda, the queen was trying to move through these like stages of grief. Like these are the rituals. We burn the clothes. Whereas Shuri, it felt like kind of threw herself into her work, was doing more intellectualizing, like not wanting to deal with the grief until she realized like there is no outrunning it. Like you cannot outwork it. Like grief will always make a space for itself, whether we want to do that or not. And so sometimes it is easier to just allow ourselves to make space for it as opposed to trying to outwork it or outrun it or throw ourselves into all kinds of different projects. Whatever we use to cope with it, sometimes it is just best to kind of make space to actually process and deal with it. So the other thing that I think that there had been a lot of speculation about, and like, okay, we knew, I think with some of the later trailers that there was going to be another Black Panther, like somebody was going to be wearing the costume. I don't think we knew who. I think kind of we were guessing like, okay, this looks like a woman's figure. So we think maybe this is a woman. So how did you all feel about the fact that Shuri was the one who became the next Black Panther?
I loved it. I thought in the first movie, she was more of like comedic relief, even though she was really important to a lot of the action. Her being the Black Panther and just also her being the central figure in the movie, kind of moving the story forward. I think it was fun to see like just her character, I think, advance. And I think having her be the Black Panther was kind of like the cherry on top of that. And a scene in the movie that signified that Shuri is more than like a sidekick. And so I did enjoy that. And I think we saw that in the first movie, like she's the one behind the technology. So it was very fitting for her to like take that on because one, no one could have understood the Black Panther role like her because of her relationship to the technology, but also because it was her brother. And so I thought that was really fitting. And you were probably going to touch on this, but at the end of the movie, we find out that T'Challa has a son. And so I'm really excited, looking forward to see his relationship with Shuri and how, if he's going to like take over the role of the Black Panther, if he's interested in that. And so I thought it was really heartwarming, but it also kind of moved Shuri to a central character instead of like the funny little sister.
I really loved that Princess Shuri became the Black Panther. I was very inspired by her reigniting the heart-shaped herb that gives them the vibranium powers. And I think it was inspiring because if at any point in time you ever think there's been so much hardship in your family, and sometimes it just feels like your family can't bounce back, it just felt like even if all of your resources, everything that your family has ever known that defined them, even if it's all burned to the ground, your family lineage will never die if you continue. If you continue to love each other, if you continue to believe in yourself, if you continue, your family lineage doesn't die with the dead. It lives on with the living. And because we saw Killmonger burn all of it. But with her genius and her tenacity and brilliance, she literally brought the family back. And I feel like I feel like that. I feel like I'm going into a time in my life where I'm thinking, wait a second, am I the future matriarch of my family? Like, oh yeah, my grandma passed, my mom will pass. One day it'll be me. I got to get this family together. And if Shuri can do it, I can too.
I just think that, like, having Shuri become the Black Panther is one of those things where it is showing the place of innovation within tradition. And so, like, there's a way that she's, like, marrying, like, the old rituals and traditions to a new kind of, like, outlook. And, like, that just shows you how, like, cultures and communities continue to evolve. And, like, that resiliency is also why we're still here. Like, when you think about Black culture, you think about, like, the African diaspora. There was a lot of separation and a lot of innovation that happened within that. And that's the reason that, like, we're able to have all these different, like, expressions of who we are that are still linked. And so for me, I also feel like Shuri becoming the Black Panther in that way, despite, like, you know, her, I guess, like, rebellion against, like, traditional rituals and stuff, like when her mom was trying to get her to do all those things, but she still found a way to, like, integrate those two things together for herself. And it still allows for Wakanda and the Black Panther to continue on. And so that's what I love the most about this choice, is that it shows a way forward and a way that allows to be, like, more expansive and, like, break what you think that you know about what it means to be the Black Panther.
More from our conversation after the break. Did you know that 1 in 100 people in the U.S. may be affected by hidradenitis suppurativa, or HS? HS is an inflammatory skin condition that can happen to almost anyone, but is typically seen in women and disproportionately affects people of color. Painful bumps, boils, and sores are the main symptoms of HS, mostly in areas of the body where skin rubs against skin, like armpits, under the breasts, groin area, or inner thighs. And it's sometimes misdiagnosed as more well-known conditions like acne or an ingrown hair. That's why it's important to find a dermatologist who specializes in diagnosing and treating skin conditions like HS. If you're living with these symptoms, you're not alone. If they're caused by HS, a dermatologist can help. So visit shinealightonhs.com now to learn more, take the quiz, and get the conversation started. That's shinealightonhs.com. Paid for by Novartis. So one of the other things that I really loved, and I think y'all are kind of speaking to some of this, it definitely feels like the quote-unquote Black girl magic felt very strong in this film. And so, you know, I loved all of the genius of Shuri, and I always loved the Dora Milaje. Like, they're so powerful, and, like, to me, it is just such a departure from what we typically see on screen in terms of, like, the armed protectors, like, and for it to be a whole army of Black women, like, that to me is just so incredible. But I also really love the introduction of Riri Williams, who now, of course, is a part of the Marvel Universe. And, you know, to your earlier point, at least around funny, like, I really feel like some of the dynamics with Shuri, Riri, and Okoye were, like, some of the funniest moments on screen. So I really enjoyed that, and I found, like, a part of that is what was so moving to me too, is that, like, you see this world where, like, Black women are in control and, like, just doing all the things, right? Like there is no part of Wakanda that is not touched by a Black woman kind of running things, which I also find, like, just incredibly inspirational.
I loved Riri so much. So the second time I saw the movie, I had dipped out the theater for like 10 minutes to get a drink, and I came back right when she was introduced, and I was like, great, this is like my favorite part of the movie. She was so lively. Honestly, her energy kind of reminded me of Sha'Carri Richardson. She had a IDGAF attitude, but she was really smart, and she knew that she was really good at what she did. And I think that was really refreshing to see, because a lot of times Black women, especially Black girls, aren't really affirmed, like, oh yeah, you're really smart, and it's okay to, like, be cocky about that and be proud of that. You don't have to be, like, you know, the humble nerd in the corner. And so I thought that was really exciting. It was good to see kind of the dynamics between, like, a Wakandan and then, like, a Black American. I liked, again, how that, like, African diaspora was highlighted through that. obviously like she had braids and they wear like so many different styles in Wakanda and in the States, but it was just really beautiful to see like so many different types of Black women on screen. And then it was really heartwarming at the end of the movie to see Shuri fix up her car, and she had lost her dad as well and had worked on the car with her dad. And so them kind of connecting like over grief and like understanding like those mementos are really important. Just like the Black Panther suit was important to Shuri. I thought that was really beautiful too.
So Mbaku was one of my favorites from the original Black Panther, but I really, really loved him in Black Panther 2 because I do feel like his role had expanded, right? And so I loved the dynamic that it seems like he has now with Shuri, right? And it does feel like there was some conversation with Prince T'Challa around like, you know, kind of take care of her kind of in my absence. And so it feels like he has become like this wise confidant to her. And at the end, I was a little confused, and I feel like I didn't know if he was trying to be funny by like showing up to the ceremony saying like, oh, I'm challenging for the throne. Like, do you think he is going to become like the like day-to-day ruler of Wakanda, like the king of Wakanda, and then Shuri is just gonna be off like being the Black Panther? Or like, what do you think all of that meant at the end?
M'Baku is the rightful and appropriate king for Wakanda. He has been a trusted advisor. He has shown up for this community every time they are in a peril of trouble. He sends his soldiers in. He has graciously lost and accepted defeat when he was not able to be the king. And I feel like now is truly his rightful time to be king of Wakanda. And that is what I'm rooting for.
I kind of saw it as like a sign of respect, because this is something that he's like always done with every leader of Wakanda, is like come in to challenge. So I think it's also in a way an acknowledgement that like he does recognize that Shuri is Black Panther, and that she's not just this like little sister, scientist, whatever, but like is a true ruler and like should be challenged in like the traditional sense as well. So I kind of saw it that way, a little like tongue in cheek, but like also I don't know how serious he is, but you know, it's always fun.
But just to clarify, was Shuri at that event? I thought she wasn't there.
She wasn't. Yeah. No, she wasn't.
That's why I was like,
that's what I'm saying. Like, I don't know if she like sent him. Yeah, I felt like she sent him like in her place. Like she was going to Haiti to reconnect with Nakia and, you know, kind of make peace with her grief. And she sent him. That's what I was imagining, so that it was like a comic relief, not that he was actually going to be kind of taking over. But I've seen some people speculate that like it's going to be like a splitting of duties where he is going to be like the king of Wakanda and she will be the Black Panther.
I like that.
And M'Baku's definitely the rightful like next leader of Wakanda. I think it makes sense. I think he's done a lot for the nation, and it's clear that he is a good leader, but also still has love, because I think a lot of good leaders are just like seeking control and power, but I think he really has love for the people. And also like consistently, he could really only protect his own tribe and his own people, but has done more than that. But then also like Shuri's young and has like a lot of life to live ahead of her. And so being in the position where you're the leader of an entire nation, that's a lot. I know I wouldn't want to be CEO at 25 or 24. And it sounds good, but dealing with a lot of grief, probably wanting to work on like her own like technological advances, just being like young and fun. I don't know if like that's really all she wants to get into. And so I think she trusts M'Baku and respects him. And so I think that's a great setup for like the future of Wakanda.
Mm-hmm. That's a good point. So how do people feel seeing Michael B. Jordan pop up in the film when Shuri arrives to the ancestral plane?
I knew it wasn't going to be what she expected, just because I guess my thought process there was like, oh, people always talk about like genetically modified things and like made things. So I was like, oh, they're definitely going to throw in like something going wrong with that. And so she had her GMO purple herb and he popped up. And I think, like I said earlier, it was very reflective of the types of emotions and thoughts and traumas you can tap into when grief happens. And so a big part of the grief she was experiencing, Killmonger played a role in that. And so I think it was very like natural, and I wasn't too surprised that he came up. I was like, okay, this definitely makes sense. And I think he challenged her thinking in that maybe, I think he was right. Like maybe your brother was a bit too noble, but that wasn't a bad thing. But I think it kind of demystified and showed her like a new light to that situation. And I think grief is so complicated, and in death we can view people as very perfect or be very angry with them. And I think after that looked at Killmonger in a different way, because she to a degree took his advice, but also looked at T'Challa in a different way. And so I was happy that they brought him back into the movie, because I think in the first Black Panther he played like devil's advocate a lot, but also, I don't want to say made very good points, but there was like an aggression to him, and what's the best word to say? A drive that I think was representative of the type of like leader Shuri wanted to be in that moment. And so I think that's why she connected with him in that moment. I think her going to the ancestral plane and seeing him kind of told her, I have so many ways I can react right now. There are so many ways I can be a leader. I obviously look up to my mother. I obviously look up to my brother. I have people around me, but this is someone who I've always viewed as an enemy who's providing me with a different perspective. So I don't think he was necessarily right or wrong. I think he was just there to show Shuri a different version of reality than what she had looked at for so long, pre the grief of losing her mom and losing her brother.
Yeah, I was shocked, but I also was like, that kind of makes sense. Because, like, in a way, Killmonger was so relentless. And, like, to be honest, Shuri is a relentless girl. Like, she literally was like, I'm going to crack the code on this, like, purple heart-shaped herb. Like, I'm doing it. I'm literally not losing any sleep over it. I will make sure that I'm able to, like, save whoever I need to save. And so it's, like, to Lisa's point, that drive, that ambition, like, all of those things, like, exist within her. And so it's not surprising that like the person that appeared to her is somebody who is sort of like that same reflection, just like in a different package and different foil and on a different mission. And so I think like it did allow her to sort of confront the parts of her that she probably kind of hid from her family a little bit, just because like her mom, T'Chaka, they were all very like a little more even-keeled and, like, you know, diplomatic, noble, like, all of those things. And, like, I feel like she probably respected it. And in certain situations, that's what she would choose. But at the same time, like, you can't deny that, like, there's a drive in there and there's, like, a heat that, like, radiates from her that, like, I think that was exactly the right choice for her to see in the ancestral plane. And it's not to say that nobody else is going to pop up later, but, like, I think as her first encounter, I was like, good. Because I also was like, who knows who you're supposed to see there? Because it's like, there are other family members we don't really know. So it's like, I don't know. It could have been Sterling K. Brown. Like, we don't know.
Well, team, as you know, I'm from the Bay Area. So I was shocked to see Killmonger because the Bay Area girl in me said that he was still alive. So to see him in the ancestral plane meant that he's not, and that's not what we wanted at all. We want him alive. So, okay, so he's in the ancestral plane. I also want to say what I enjoyed about Killmonger's conversation with Shuri is that I feel like he was the second person to tell her that you can no longer really navigate as a child and you need to adjust your eyes from childhood to adulthood. The first person who I noticed said this to her was M'Baku, because he said something along the lines of like, I can't pretend like you're a child anymore. You've experienced too much loss. And I feel like Killmonger the same way. You think that I'm evil. You're so mad that I'm here. Add some nuance to your perspective. Add some gray to your black and white, because being a child is not going to save you anymore. And I feel like a lot of her continued aggression towards him in that scene was because it's so hard when someone tells you you don't have a choice to grow up. You must You have to. And that scene just made me think about, wow, like, how long do Black kids get to be kids before they experience so much trauma that they literally have to adjust their eyes to be adults?
Very good point. More from our conversation after the break. Did you know that 1 in 100 people in the U.S. may be affected by hidradenitis suppurativa, or HS? HS is an inflammatory skin condition that can happen to almost anyone, but is typically seen in women and disproportionately affects people of color. Painful bumps, boils, and sores are the main symptoms of HS, mostly in areas of the body where skin rubs against skin, like armpits, under the breast, groin area, or inner thighs. And it's sometimes misdiagnosed as more well-known conditions like acne or an ingrown hair. That's why it's important to find a dermatologist who specializes in diagnosing and treating skin conditions like HS. If you're living with these symptoms, you're not alone. If they're caused by HS, a dermatologist can help. So visit shinealightonhs.com now to learn more, take the quiz, and get the conversation started. That's shinealightonhs.com. Paid for by Novartis. So to your earlier point, Frida, the 3 words that you chose, a part of the tension that I found very difficult, and I was wondering going into this movie, like, okay, what is going to be the storyline? Like, I know, well, I would imagine, and I hope we get a cut at some point, like, of what was supposed to be the storyline before we lost Chadwick, and then how they had to rewrite. What felt difficult to me was these, like, 2 communities of color, like having to have this tension that was created by white people, right? So, you know, the FBI or whatever this government entity was that went and, you know, had this initial encounter with the people of Talokan, and then the people of Talokan thinking it was the Wakandans, right? And so this feud is like created when it really had nothing to do with either of them like beefing with one another. And so what were your thoughts around like this introduction of the Talokan people, and this is how we now meet them because we are going to war with the Wakandans?
Going back to being from the Bay Area, once again, if Killmonger was alive, I feel like Killmonger and Namor would have really just roughed him up. And I think we all know what I'm talking about. I'm interested to see, at this point, we've had 2 movies talking about a certain demographic of people causing problems, but we've never fought them on camera. Now, the little Black Panther in me, because my grandma was a Black Panther, the little Black Panther in me is thinking, is Marvel ever really going to let us throw hands with white people on the screen?
I also was thinking about, okay, what will the next movie bring, given that we've seen internal conflict with Wakanda, now conflict between them and like an indigenous nation. And the big like elephant in the room is that it's the white people causing a lot of these problems. And so at the end of the movie, we see King Namor talk about how when either they attack like the US, France, whatever, or if they come for them, because now, you know, we saw in the opening scene, they've detected vibranium in the ocean, that there will be no choice but Wakanda to be on their side because of like all the events in the movie. And so I was thinking about that because it was interesting that he said that in the middle of the movie, or like when we were first introduced with him, he was like, my goal is to get you guys on our side because we're the oppressed people and we're stronger together. But towards the end, he kind of had a malicious tone to what he said. And so, I don't know, I was just constantly thinking about how, yes, it was initially very smart and it would have been great if they would have joined forces, but it seemed like, I forgot the name of the kingdom. I keep forgetting it.
Talokan.
The Talokan, King Namor was very interested in retaliating, kind of taking over and like having power, instead of Shuri, I feel like is more about having peace and unity. And so I'm excited for the next movie to see that tension kind of play out, knowing that they now have an alliance, but their alliance is, I guess, being approached from different perspectives, yet they have a common enemy. And so how that will all play out. Yeah, I think that's going to be probably very interesting in Black Panther 3, if we get it. I hope we'll get it. But I think something that I'm kind of looking forward to is the series finally addressing like the real enemy are the people who want the Wakandan resources and want indigenous resources. And that's what it's always been. But I think they're kind of teasing that out little by little. And so I think we got kind of a more profound take on that in this movie.
Yeah, and shout out to like just the brilliance of Ryan Coogler, because I feel like he is one of the only ones who really could have done this with justice. I don't know that we are going to ever see that though in a Disney-owned Marvel movie. I don't know. I don't know how far, he's going to be allowed to kind of push the needle there. So, I know we are running out of time, so I definitely want to make sure that we do spend some time thinking about the ending of the movie, because that is when, I was losing it all throughout, but once that baby showed up on screen and we find out that, and something in my mind, I feel like this is like the Louisiana, kind of like always keep your third eye open. Something in my mind early on said, I bet Nakia had a baby. Like, I bet that is a part of why she was away. And so we learned that, she was expecting, and that the Black Panther knew about it before he passed, and that, they had been in conversation with the child to kind of prepare him for his father's death. So how did you feel about the reveal of a new Prince T'Challa?
I was like obsessed with that, and like similar to you, it was like, I think what like keyed me in was like, girl, you didn't go back for the funeral. Like, I get it, but like and then like thinking about like the timeline of that, like, man, if she showed up at that funeral pregnant, like, yeah. So I was like, you know what? Great. And then when it was like revealed and like truly solidified too, I was just like, this makes me so happy. Like, because it was also like this parting gift almost, because it's like now Shuri once again has family, like in the very real sense that she was missing it. And like now in a way, like, yeah, she's an aunt, but she gets to also be like this like mentor and like impart all the wisdom like her brother gave her dad, her mom, and like there's somewhere for that to go. And he's so cute. Like, he's so cute. And it was just like such a sweet moment. And especially like having followed the ritual of her like finally like releasing the grief and like burning the clothes, I think it was just like a very poetic way to like receive that. It was like almost as if like now she's finally ready for like a new beginning, and the new beginning literally was like, I'm right here. And so yeah, I thought that was beautiful. This whole movie was just like really, really poetic to me.
So we've already kind of touched a little bit on predictions for what we might see in a Black Panther 3, or as we continue with the Wakanda universe. What are you thinking that we might see in a future film or in future films? Or hoping that we might see?
I don't know if I necessarily trust them to like go completely at colonization. I feel like they're going to like do the thing where they like jump and now it's like everybody against like the aliens or whatever. They're going to take it to space. They're going to take it to the nano or like quantum realm or something, just because I don't know if people are like truly ready to like see that. And like maybe they will be by the time it's like ready, but I don't know. I don't have a lot of faith in that. But I do think that there will be some type of seeing what that alliance looks like between Talokan and Wakanda.
I'm hoping that we actually do get to see little Prince T'Challa grow up, like this particular child himself, grow up in the Marvel universe, because I just think that, again, like you said, is an awesome kind of parting gift. And for the people who were like worried that like we would not have the Black Panther character again because of what that character meant for Black kids, right, seeing themselves as superheroes, I do think it gives us like a new start to that, in addition to Shuri, right? So it, to me, kind of ensures like the longevity of the character, which I think is really cool. So I'm hoping that we will see that little guy grow up in the Marvel universe.
I can't see a movie for Black Panther that doesn't involve squaring up with colonizer. So I don't think I'm going to get one. I also think Ryan Coogler has done a phenomenal job on both of these films, and it might be time for him to, rightfully so, get the rest and space that he deserves after all of this hard work he's done and all of the grieving that he and the entire cast are still going through. Because when you watch every press tour, people keep asking them about, how did you find out about Chadwick and what was your reaction? And if you have to do 10 interviews a day over the course of 2 weeks, I mean, it's just constantly reprocessing that grief. I would be, as a fan of this franchise, I would understand if I didn't get another movie for 15 years. I would understand. With that being said, there are other characters that I'm very excited about. So I did learn that Proximity Media, which is Ryan Coogler and his wife Zenzi's production company, they are in development for a series around the woman that Elise was talking about earlier, Riri Williams, aka Ironheart. I had no idea until I looked this up that suit that she's in, she's truly an MCU. I'm new. I'm just learning about the MCU. So I'm so excited about that. And I feel like this film introducing me to her and her character is enough, which is why, again, I can go X amount of years without another movie. Give me all the Ironheart you got. Because like Elise said, she's a star. She's a star. I can't wait to watch her on television or the big screen again.
I want to second seeing Ironheart / Riri Williams in other films, whether it's the next Black Panther and also having her own series. That's exciting for me. I think what's also exciting is seeing how in future like Black Panther films or whatever comic books that come out, TV shows, how they incorporate other African countries. They kind of allude to it in like the scenes, like, oh, we're going to go here. I think they were in like Mali for one of the scenes, but we never really get to see like their leaders and how they interact with, think about Wakanda. And so that's really exciting for me. I hope that in the next movie, if they address like more world conflicts or global conflicts, that we get to see just like another perspective of like the African diaspora. So I think that'll be exciting.
I love that. I love that idea too. Well, we will be staying tuned for all of the genius that continues to come from Ryan Coogler's camp. Again, another beautiful job from Ruth Carter and Hannah Beecher, I believe, the set designer and the costume designer. I mean, just beautiful worlds that they create, and the people look beautiful on screen. So just kudos to all of them for just another outstanding job with Black Panther 2. All right, y'all. Well, thank y'all for joining me and sharing your thoughts. Y'all weigh in. Make sure you let us know how you felt about Black Panther 2. What were your thoughts? What's staying with you? I mean, we will be joining the conversation online. I'm so glad the team was able to join me to chat about Wakanda Forever. We'd love to hear your thoughts about the film as well. Join the conversation online by using the hashtag TBGInSession and weighing in. And don't forget to text 2 of your girls to tell them to check out the episode right now. If you're looking for a therapist in your area, check out our therapist directory at therapyforblackgirls.com/directory. And if you want to continue digging into this topic or just be in community with other sisters, come on over and join us in the Sister Circle. It's our cozy corner of the internet designed just for Black women. You can join us at community.therapyforblackgirls.com. This episode was produced by Frida Lucas and Elise Ellis, and editing was done by Dennis and Bradford. Thank y'all so much for joining me again this week. I look forward to continuing this conversation with you all real soon. Take good care.
Eliminate the stress of high-interest credit card debt and take control of your financial future. Happy Money offers personal loans from $5,000 to $40,000 with low fixed rates and no hidden fees. Introducing a happier way to borrow. Apply today at happymoney.com. Happy Money. Fund your happy. NMLS ID number 1396805. Not all applicants may qualify. Loans are not offered in Massachusetts and Nevada. Happy Money works with lending partners who originate the loans. Additional terms, conditions, and eligibility requirements may apply.
Life with migraine attacks can mean missing out on big moments with friends and family. Thankfully, there's Nurtec ODT Rimegepant 75 milligrams. The only medication that's proven to treat a migraine attack and prevent episodic migraines in adults. Get back to enjoying life with Nurtec ODT, the all-in-one medication. Don't take if allergic to Nurtec ODT or any of its ingredients. The most common side effects were nausea, indigestion, and stomach pain. Talk to a doctor about Nurtec ODT. For important safety, prescribing, and patient information, visit NURTEC.com.